and I appreciate both the tribal and the state and county systems of care members being with us today. The title is on the perils of management and supervision, and anybody who's been a manager or been managed or supervised certainly can relate to this. If you, moving along, this slide number 3 really talks to, I'm here hosted by the National Indian Child Welfare Association, who is a partner with the National TA Network for Children's Behavioral Health. And certainly most of you are aware or have knowledge about both entities, and I appreciate them asking me and being able to provide you with some information that hopefully will be of assistance to you. I know that there will be opportunity to ask questions at the end, so please do that through the public chat for now as your questions come up, and we'll be sure to track those and get those answered. The agenda for today really is about looking at what is leadership, management, and supervision, some central keys to success, identifying some behavioral competencies as building blocks for employees and for how to best supervise and manage, how to do performance reviews and do those in a way that really enhance the relationship and the productivity or performance of an employee. And lastly, how do you retain key employees, and what are the really the integrated ways of looking at the life interests of your employees and how that fits and integrates into job scope. So I will move us along and start a little bit with defining leadership, management, and supervision. And I think it's important to agree as an organization on just what is leadership, what is management, and what does that mean in terms of supervision. So I'm not going to read the slides for you other than to tell you that the important element here is that you have consistency and continuity and how you approach each of these and how you know when to wear what hat, and knowing that in one single conversation you might be in all 3 of those. So you can definitely see that leadership's focused on the future, management is really about the logistics, and supervision is how you interact with employees and key staff every day. The leadership, just one little snapshot, is really about how to lead through the changes that happen in the work we do and in the industry around us. And these are highly dynamic times that we're in terms of what might be happening locally and certainly what's happening on a federal level. And we, in a sense, need to keep our eyes on the prize and move towards a target, knowing that we have staff who are looking to us to lead and to provide reassurances. Even if there are times we don't necessarily know, it's important that we move in a direction and that we continually keep that prize up there. And think of it as you might as if you ever go on vacation, the first thing you typically do is pick where you're going to go. And leadership is like that. You pick where you're going to go and you move incrementally in that direction. The beliefs and actions that are really important in this process are pretty simple, in the sense that I really think it's important that you, as a leader, as a manager, as a supervisor, be the same person every day. That the person who walks in the door is predictable, doesn't change dynamically, meaning not letting or allowing your how your morning did go or didn't go in the effort that you wanted it to go, but you're the same person. The manner in which you problem solve, the manner in which you bring people together, the manner in which you deal with roadblocks that may come in is pretty much the same every day. That's helpful to the people around you, and it's helpful to them as they serve their community. So being a good steward, looking at diversity and really being able to brace that. Again, you represent where you're going, so every day your behavior, your beliefs need to reflect that, and it's just important that we know that that's there. I think the last one I'll spend a few extra words on, the build strengths of workforce, is decide what kind of an organization you're going to be. Are you a learning organization? Are you a productivity-based organization? Are you an organization that's collaborative in nature? That's really important to do. And I worked once in an organization that was a learning organization. So an example being that every day, the first half hour of our day was spent learning. And whether we were at our desk reading, whether we were brought together to learn on a topic, we were daily kept in the model of being a learning organization, and throughout our discussions and decision making and working with kids, in this case it was a residential facility, we excelled at being learners and carrying that throughout our work. So the next area I want to lead into is management, and really understanding what management is about. And for the simplest of terms, I would say being a manager is like being a mechanic. You work behind the scenes, you make machines work, you make systems work, and if you can remember one thing in terms of being a manager, that managers work on the system. So when there's a problem in an organization, 95% of the problem is the system, and only 5% of the problem is the person or personnel. And oftentimes in organizations, you'll see that flip-flopped. And you'll see management spending a lot of time on personnel issues when really, as a mechanic, your job is to work on the system and to reorganize it, to step back and take a look, to get new information in, and managing in such a way that only 5% of a problem in an organization is related to the person or personnel side, gives you a lot of ability to make changes, to use those leadership skills to move in a direction that's important for the organization. And in this kind of an organization, you have a lot less what I would call scapegoating going on, meaning the problem roams from person to person to department. It really eliminates that because it allows management to sit down and look at the functions and the interactions and the communications to move towards the target they want to, and then to bring along the employees or the teams in that direction. So to facilitate that, I like to think of management as a mechanic in terms of that there are 5 pillars holding up the organization. And one is the leadership and governance, which we've talked about, and how staff members in an organization can participate in that leadership and governance. We want to look at financial management because if we don't keep our eye on that, we might not be around. So we want to always keep our picture focused on what keeps us healthy financially in terms of serving our community and in terms of taking care of our employees. We want to learn how to market and innovate. In every problem that there is in an organization, there's a creative solution. So part of this is focusing on what are the opportunities that a roadblock may provide. And so sometimes organization gets stuck at the roadblock. We always need somebody in that leadership or management structure to be able to say, you know, if we look past this, here's the opportunity. So that's leadership, financial management, and one other strategy back to financial management would be to be focused on revenue, the revenue opportunities. Many times organizations get focused on the expense or cost side and don't look to the revenue side. So I would always say, and in my consulting work, I always ask for how to look at that in a balanced manner so that we're focusing on both sides of that equation. Everybody is engaged in technology today. Most everybody on the phone or on the webinar today has a smartphone. They're getting information all the time. So the big sort of difficulty in this or challenge to all of this is how we manage the amount of information that comes in, how we make sense of it, and how we become more data-driven in use of information. And that's probably a whole other workshop talking about data-driven decision-making. It is at a point in the work we do today where we do have a lot of information and we can learn how to make that useful to us. Lastly, but not of least importance, is strategic management. So again, being strategic in your decision-making about where it is that you're going, who you're bringing with you, and keeping at the center of the table the community in which we serve. So I have a project right now where I'm developing a community or a children's mental health delivery system. And the important part of this process within this larger community has been to always hold the children that we're serving and their families in the middle of the table, and to continually, as we move forward, have disagreements to talk about that strategically in terms of that population that we want to serve, and in this case, the children of a community. So leadership, financial management, marketing, technology, and strategic, 5 pillars of your management structure and your model. So let's do some comparisons at this point, that understanding what is leadership and what is management and where they cross over. And maybe I think those are pretty clear in here as we've gone through. So let's focus on the middle. Together they accomplish a goal. They explain the vision of our organization. They give us an idea of who's responsible for what. It helps to motivate others, and it certainly is a way together that we mobilize resources. And one model of leadership and management that I really like is what I would call a lead managed organization. And a lead managed organization is one in which everybody around the table has a voice. And this is probably the best way to describe it, that whether we're a worker who's on the street doing the work, or whether we're somebody whose job is to manage the finances or to relate to the larger community in terms of resource development, we all sit at the table and we all have a voice. And in a lead organization, it means that maybe we don't have a vote sometimes. So when there's something that needs to be decided on, a vote is based on who has responsibility for the outcome of the vote or the problem or the direction we're going. So at the table, everybody has a voice, but not everybody has a vote. And it's important to be able to understand that I have a vote when I have some point of accountability in that decision making. So as we look at organizations that are lead managed, or that they have a charismatic leader, or that they even have, in some organizations you'll see a chief operating officer who is more aligned with the managing side, that we understand what our voice is about, how we can have it heard, and understand that at times being heard is the best we're going to do, because we don't have any accountability in the decision making. But I do think it's important to understand those pieces of that when you look at defining leading and managing, and where do I fit in that matrix. I want to move us along to the next piece, which is supervision. And what is it? So this becomes really important, that it's defined within the leadership and management side, but then also communicated to the folks who work with us and for us. These are just different definitions from different dictionaries, but you can see that in a sense, the one I like is to, really the third one is to have the direction and oversight of the performance of others. I think it captures best what supervision is, but supervision really is the nuts and the bolts of how we become of service to the people who work for us and how we encourage and assist them in terms of the service that they're providing for the children or families that we work with or the other community entities that are involved with us. The typical duties of, responsibilities of supervisors, again, anybody on the phone has been either the supervisor or the person being supervised, but some key elements is to really be able to communicate clearly with staff, to ensure that we monitor the work or oversee it, and that we have a way of giving information to our employees, or that we can engage them in working on the system if it's not working. And lastly, that we hire, train, and evaluate staff, along with the occasional times that we have to do discipline or sort of progressive enhancements with them. Hiring and training is really interesting. I worked for an organization where we did group interviews from a hire standpoint. And it was working with kids, and it was a way for us to build some efficiencies in terms of the amount of time it takes to supervise and to train. But the group interview process, I will offer, gives you a lot of information about how people think about a question, but how they interact with other folks' answer and how they interact in problem solving as a group. So whether you interview or hire on a one-by-one basis or a group basis, I would offer that group hiring processes really teach you a great deal, and could be something if you have a high demand for workers that you could utilize in the future as a way of building in some efficiencies. But again, largely we want to make sure we offer good information that's clear, that we are seen, overseeing the work and participating with the employee, and that we have a clear process from hiring to evaluating. Again, building on that, we want to be able to give the picture of us as a team, and I think a team doesn't have an I in it, and a team is all of us. It's about how we achieve together, how we enhance each other's work, and I've been blessed with having opportunities to work in a team environment and to have mentors who have been really good about what that looks like and how we participate and work together. And ultimately, we live together in families and communities, and I think that's important to emulate in the process of being a supervisor. It also then means that we have unique relationships with the people who work with us, and that we not only know them in the work environment, but we know a little bit about them and understand what it is and how it is that they come to work. I think those become really important. The others that we set clear standards for performance. Example of that one place that I ran a kids psych hospital, and we were having difficulties around when people came to work and when they left. And when I joined in the team, one of the first things was looking at that, because we had lots of people checking into work who weren't scheduled. We had lots of folks clocking them in when they weren't really there. So one of the things I had to do was be at every shift change to ensure that people knew that this part of their job, checking in, coming to work, being on schedule, was something that was going to be managed. And so I'd be there at 6 in the morning, I'd be there at 4 in the afternoon, and I'd be there at 11 o'clock at night, checking people in or greeting them, having some fun with that process. But I think if we're going to set standards, and standards that you'd think would be just normal, and people would follow those, don't always happen. So being there, being visible, encouraging, setting the standard becomes really important. If you aren't there to do the work with them, that's a process where folks who maybe aren't as committed may not really manage their own behavior in a way that's helpful to the outcome that you'd like. So I want to take you through this exercise about managing staff and having you think for a moment, and we'll just take a few minutes on this, but think about, what it is that you like the most about being a supervisor or managing staff. What is the key characteristic there that goes on? What do you least like? And you can transpose this into, if you were talking with a person you supervise, what do they most like about their supervision management process? What do they least like? What's the most challenging part about hiring staff, or what was the most challenging part about being hired? And lastly, what's the most challenging part about managing and evaluating staff? Or if you're the employee, what's the most challenging part about being managed or supervised? That answering these questions will tell you a lot about what I would call the meta picture of your organization. So if you were looking 10,000 feet down into your organization in regards to managing, what would you see happening? And the answers to these questions will tell you a great deal. So if as a supervisor or manager you like the leadership aspects, or maybe you like being creative in terms of the team problem solving, what you like least, maybe it's the accountability side, having to do evaluations. All of that information tells you about you, but they become broader pictures about the organization. If your least liked activity is the accountability of supervision, that's a broader problem and opportunity for your organization. So the opportunity side is, how do we make this a process where everybody gets value, everybody has learning, everybody feels a sense of pride on that aspect. So I like to do this exercise when I go into organizations and we're looking at leadership and management and supervision, to ask these, because it tells me a great deal about the organization, and it assists me in providing consultation that moves them beyond the things that they least like. So again, this is something you can do in your organization, and understand that there are things to be learned in this process, and that it's not bad to not like accountability. It just tells you a little bit about where you are organizationally and in terms of the maturity of the organization as well. I work with one organization that's outside your world in terms of the system of care, but it's a very young organization, and they make a lot of what I would call immature decisions that are based on personalities. So young organizations often look like their leader, and they're very person-based. A mature organization is an organization that is very system-based. So the idea being that no matter who the leader is, the system will sustain itself and be there. And you can really understand an organization by looking at how decisions are made. Are they made systemically, or are they made based on a person? And this process helps me understand where in the growth of an organization they are, from the meta picture side, 10,000 feet up, down to what happens in the meeting rooms and interactions with the team. So probably enough said on that. I want to go and talk about keys to success and dive into that little piece with you. Here are really the 8 areas of keys to having good shared outcomes in terms of shared being leadership and management, the workers, and the community being served. So we have set goals. We have an end-to-end picture about what it is that we want to do in our community and what it is that we want to have in terms of the relationships that we have within our organizations. We want to define accountability. So if my job is as a care coordinator, a navigator, I work directly with families, I want to know the accountability pieces that go into that, the who, what, when, where, and how, as I call it. I want to be able to practice the 3 C's. And this is an important element of communication in the organization and how that translates down into communication in the work we do. So the 3 things that I always look for is how do we demonstrate that we care about each other? And these are activities that happen between leadership and managers and folks who do the work in the communities. How do we demonstrate commitment? Meaning, what lengths do I go to support the work that goes on with families? And again, lastly, how it is that we communicate to each other, about each other, and with each other. That understanding those 3 C's and being able to measure those really become important to how we as an organization are able to carry out our work. We also want to learn how to delegate. Person-driven organizations, you'll see that there's not much delegation. System-driven organizations have a lot of delegation where responsibility is given out and authority is given out to carry out the work and then to be accountable for the work that's happened. In organizations where you see a lot of delegation being used, you'll see work groups, teams of people making problem solving or creating unique opportunities. And that's a critical piece that I think when you look at delegating and when you look at the maturity of an organization, you'll see more of that. You'll also see ways in which employees can be recognized. And I've seen this both and experienced it both in terms of individual recognition and team recognition. And I'm more a fan of team recognition than I am of individual recognitions like Employee of the Year. I'm more interested in things where the team gets recognized for innovation, gets recognized for how everybody's doing, and not certainly an individual. It really promotes the team. I think the other piece is to have fun at work, with the motto being that work hard, play hard. I really agree with that. I think that's critical. One where we want to build respect, so we don't ask of others what we wouldn't be willing to do ourselves. And to always, if we're the supervisor or the manager, that we think about that. And like when I ran the Kids Psych Hospital, I worked night shifts, the midnight through the morning, because I needed to know what it was like to be in that role, what went on, how I could support them, and that the team members knew that I'd go the distance. And lastly, we want to think about what we might call quality improvement, but I think I call it continual improvement, and in the sense that continual means if you put a wavy line that sort of gradually goes up, that's continual. Understanding that we're trying to get to the pinnacle, but that there's ups and downs in that process, and the ups and downs allow for us to learn. So quality, in my mind means that there's continual learning, that nobody gets hurt, and that we use self-evaluation. those three elements to me, when I think of quality, that's really important. So we have continual learning, we have nobody getting hurt, and we have self-evaluation, meaning we encourage people to think about the work they do, what helps them do it, and how we can use their strengths and knowledge to get there. So those are the real 8 keys to a shared outcome. And I know it's a little elementary, but I think it's important to have some foundational pieces that we agree upon in terms of both the leadership aspect, meaning somebody who's leading the charge, the managers who work on the system, and the employees who work within that system. So let's think outside the box a bit in terms of how do we build behavioral competencies within our workers. And the focus here is how to really keep and groom employees for the long term, that we don't want to see a great deal of turnover. And many of you may have been in systems or been in organizations, or maybe you're in one now where there's a great deal of turnover, and there's information to be shared. There's a lot to be learned about those kind of organizations. I'm assisting one now where their turnover rate is they lose people every 6 months. And it definitely is a system problem. It is not a problem in terms of the goal of the organization. It is not a problem in terms of everybody having a shared picture of what the outside outcome is, but there are problems in terms of the system itself and how the system gets worked on and how it supports the work of the folks who get in there and help kids and families. So let's get into a few slides about the building competencies. So we want to understand our employees and why they come to work every day. That's really critical for you as managers or leadership to understand why it is that somebody comes to work every day. You know, what is it that brings them in? Is it the paycheck? Is it the kind of work? Is it that they get something into work? And I really like to think about this in terms of how work is what I would call need satisfying. So in effort to say, why do people come to work? I think they come for 5 reasons. One is certainly the paycheck, and I call that survival. The other is about belonging, and I would say belonging is the ability to feel as if they're a part of a group with a shared values and shared experiences. So it's also, in a way, belonging is about giving and receiving love, and I think that that's really critical. I think the third sort of need satisfying issue is about power. So power is not necessarily power over others, but it's the ability to achieve, the ability to gain status, the ability to work as a team to accomplish something. The fourth one is fun. So coming to work, and fun is really about laughing, learning, and playing. And a workplace has to have that ability for me as a worker to laugh, to learn, and to play with those around me, and also to be able to encourage that in terms of those people we serve. And last one is about freedom. And freedom is the ability to move around and make choices. So going back to a lead organization is that ability to have a voice, the ability to come up with innovations, the ability to say, I think I can do that, and for the management side to jump up and say, we're in it, we're going to help you get there. So as we look at building the competencies, I always like to define how I think about people who come to work every day and how these competencies really fit into and encourage them to be able to satisfy their needs in the workplace. They're really, when we get back to competencies and try to, I think, put them in a numerical or quantitative place, we're really talking about skills that we ask that people have and skills that we contribute to so they do the job well, shared values and motives. You know, again, getting back to why do people come to work? How do they think, learn, develop attitudes. So competencies that relate to how we work as a team. So it's again back to how we recognize the team, where the team's going, how we together talk about the team and learn from each other and communicate with each other. Our behaviors. So again, how we, through the meta picture, looking at 10,000 feet up, down into the daily interactions of people and the work they do, how we encourage it, how we manage, how we supervise, how we invest in our people, how we constantly keep or continually sort of keep that vision about where we're headed, and that we that we pause at times and take in new information about that picture. Is it still relevant? Does it need to be adjusted based on the work that's going on the ground? Does it fit into our mission? So again, I think organizations need to build in a moment of pause or quarterly evaluations, or I know some organizations do it annually. I'm not sure annual pauses and evaluating works anymore because our environment is changing so quickly. So I'm really promoting quarterly pauses or charges. I don't call them retreats anymore, but moments where you really look at the work you're doing and why you're doing it, and you have information to allow you to do that. And the last one, again, is that knowledge, that information, where we're promoting a sense of social awareness about what we do, self-awareness, where we're really promoting people working together and engaging and having an impact on the larger outcomes. They may have an impact in the work they do every day with families and kids. So they'd also need to know that that makes a difference in terms of the organization. And so those are really the 5 categories that I think are important in terms of competency. So skill, values and motives, attitudes, behaviors, and knowledge, to try to get those in sync and to understand that we, as folks who are in leadership and management and providing supervision, that we're emulating that each day and through each interaction that we have with others. And moving this along into probably the more difficult part of the work we do, and that's the performance management, is how should we do performance evaluations? And I think, again, it needs to be laid out in terms of everybody has a job description. We have some behavioral competencies that we have some expectations around, and we have a tool really that promotes and works with that, and that provides continuity for the worker so they can see that their job has relevance in terms of the work they do every day, but also relevance in terms of the larger picture, and certainly relevance in terms of their performance. And I'm a big proponent of self-evaluation, where we ask folks to look at their work and to evaluate it in terms of those constructs that we've talked about. That we also look at this in terms of key goals that we're looking for employees. So we want to be results-oriented. And we can't be results-oriented if each employee that works for us doesn't have a plan for themselves, and the plan is not relevant in terms of the organization. So part of our work is at the start, when we hire somebody, we get through that 30 or 60 or 90-day evaluation, that we set goals, and goals in terms of them as employees and goals in terms of the organization, and that we track and monitor that through regular supervision. And regular supervision means that we have the goals there, that we're reviewing them, that we're having documentation to support that. And that number 3 there is really an area where I think the most supervision falls down, is there's not an active process of regular supervision and documentation of that supervision period, whether it's a 15 minutes every week, half hour weekly, or more often, that actually when you do sit down, that the notes from, that the goals and the notes from the previous time you had supervision happen and are written down and can be used in the ongoing process of assessing how we're doing. This also may speak to the model in which you do supervision. There's a model that I've seen called shotgun supervision, where it just happens whenever you and the person happen to be together. I'm not a fan of that. I would be more a fan of a structured supervision process with documentation each supervision that's reflective of where you want to go. And think about that in the meta picture model. So if the organization knows where it's going, it's strategic about that, and you're strategic about that with each employee, think about that in the work that goes on with kids and families. It becomes strategic, and it becomes connected and documented, so there's a relevance all through the organization. And I've learned that the hard way, so I've come about that in a way that I've been on the other end. I've worked in and at times have run organizations that have been really personality driven and that haven't been good about supervision. And I will tell you that those often don't end up very successfully. So think about those first three. The next three, having an appropriate setting, delivering your message clearly, being encouraging, all of those are important in terms of the 6 steps to successful review. So that parade model of, by having an appropriate setting, this gets back to what I said about a regular time and a place that you meet and having clear expectations and documentations, and that you do take the time to recognize people and encourage them, not in the manner of a big award or reward, but rather in them saying, I want to have this skill, and being successful in helping them reach that. And one manner that I would say is related to that is each of my employees has a education plan. So we only go to trainings in which it builds on their resume or adds to the work through having a certification or a licensure in terms of their resume, you might say. But it also means that, the work that they're doing is progressive in terms of their learning, because I think that will have an impact on the ground. So just a few little ways to think about your interactions around performance. And when I say self-assessment, I really do mean that we're looking at this is the model, where you would say, person comes in and they'd say, well, you'd ask them what's working, what's not working. The what's not working, you'd say, well, what do you know about that situation and yourself in that situation? Have you seen anybody else who's been successful in that situation? And what would you like to learn from that situation? So rather than telling them what they can do, you're tapping in and helping them to think and assess and come up with where they want to go. And then in the next supervision session, you can go back to that and say, gosh, here's where we were last time. How are you doing? So that's self-evaluation. It's not somebody telling somebody what to do, but it's helping them to walk through that process and using their strengths and their skills and their innovation on how to help them get there. So I'll just, anybody wants further information about more of a self-assessment process, please get to me. I'd be more than willing to give you information on that. So then what about our troubled times where we have to coach or corrective action? And again, if you're coaching somebody, I like the word coaching because that reflects that you're helping them move in a direction, but you also have to be pretty direct in that process. So if I'm sitting down with a person who I've observed has not been meeting their goals, has had some troubles, the first thing I'm going to do is coach. And that means I'm going to clearly state the problem. So you and I are here today because of X. this is my expectation around this issue. Here's the time frame in which this needs to be resolved or improved, and this is the expected outcome. So the next time that this comes up or we meet, here's the outcome I expect, and here's how the coaching side of it. Here's how I'm going to be helpful. We're going to continue in regular supervision. We're going to have goals. I'm going to role play with you, whatever it is that you think could be helpful. So on one level, you're saying, here's what needs to happen, and the next level is, here's how I'm going to be a part of that, so that I'm part of the answer about where we're going and not part of the roadblock, that I always want to position myself to be part of the solution. And I think that's really important to do. Is the message, again, think about the meta picture, is there's always a solution. You're always moving in a direction towards a common picture or common goal. So the other thing that I think is important in this process, we talked about how you retain folks, is really to know about the people who work for you. And I put up here just an example in terms of millennials. And I can say this because I'm not a millennial. I'm 59 years old, so I've got to work through this process, but I certainly have millennials in my workplace, and I know that because they are always on their phone in one capacity or another, in which not always do I understand. So my learning is how the heck to supervise and communicate, have expectations both with that person and through their device that seems to be attached to them regularly. But here's what millennials want in a workplace. They want purpose. They want to have development opportunities. They want creativity. They need to be coached. They need ongoing sort of information on how things are going. I need to be really strength-based, and I need to think about what is their quality of life. How do they think about that differently than I might think about it? So the idea being that, how is what we're doing today adding value to my life today, personally and professionally? So again, the idea here is you retain people in the workforce by understanding who they are and how who they are fits into, again, that bigger picture about where you're going. And I know that's a very quick sort of synopsis, but I wanted you to know that when you think about the perils of managing folks and personnel, that part of the keys is understanding who walks in the door every day, having a clear picture about where we're headed, being the same person every day, you being the same person every day that walks in. So what you see is what you get, and I will tell you that's the biggest compliment an employee can give a manager, is what I see, is when they say you're the same person every day, really critical. So having said all that, I think, and having processes of supervising and helping folks in terms of their goals and helping them in terms of sometimes having to coach them, all of that really is important to where the organization's headed and keeping staff around. So I'm going to stop because I see that I've ate up a lot of the time, and I know that there may be a few questions. So thank you, everybody, and I'll take whatever questions we can in this short period of time left.
Okay, and folks who dialed in, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to unmute the line so you can ask your questions directly, or you can put them in the chat box. And if you didn't dial in, go ahead and put your questions in the public chat for Dan to answer.
Hi, Dan. This is Tristan from NICWA.
Hi, Tristan.
Hey, I just typed in the chat box, but now that I'm unmuted, I can ask you. Any specific tips for, managing burnout and self-care for staff?
Tristan, Tristan, thank you for asking that question, because I've seen this as a key issue in many of the communities I work with as it relates to trauma, either historical or intergenerational trauma, and also in terms of working with families and kids where there has been a lot of trauma. And I would encourage every organization to have a way in which they assist people in debriefing and energizing themselves. And I'll just, one example, I ran a kids psych hospital. Our nurses were at the front end of a lot of trauma, both in terms of how children presented and sometimes how they interacted with nursing staff. Weekly, we had a debriefing exercise, an event for our team members as a way for them to let go of that. So I think that's one thing workplaces can do, is have a way in which they recognize that part of our job is to keep our workers healthy, and that sometimes they come either with trauma or they're experiencing it, and we need a way for them to sort of just debrief and let it go. So thanks for that question.
Sure. Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Dan? Go ahead and put them in the chat box, or if you're one of the folks that dialed in, your phone line's currently unmuted. Go ahead and speak up. While we're waiting for any last questions, Dan, I actually had a question. You mentioned that performance evaluations are a component of good supervision, and you expressed that you really liked a form of self-evaluation. I'd like to get sort of your take on, I've been at organizations that had two different types of evaluations. One was more of a top-down approach to evaluation, and then at other organizations it was more of a 360 approach to evaluation, where your coworkers would provide feedback to the supervisor on your performance because you interact with them on a regular basis. Do you have a preference for either of those? And are there any pros or cons to either?
Sure. Thanks, Gary. I do. The top-down one is sort of one that I would like to see go away. I like the 360. However, it's in the fact that even in a self-evaluation process, part of what you do is ask for additional information that could be helpful for a person in assessing their performance and where they're headed. It's cumbersome in that it takes time. And so one answer to that is, in organizations who embrace self-evaluation, they do monthly group supervision, and that becomes a place in which people can get external information from people on the team or people outside. So I think what I've seen with the 360 is it's sort of the best practice model. However, it's cumbersome. So being able to figure out how to do that in a regular, ongoing group model is the best I've seen, and it's less cumbersome, and it happens sort of naturally. So I would lean towards how to do that in a natural way. And the top-down, it's efficient, and but it's not always very satisfying for the person who is actually getting the information. So if there's a way to have ongoing and as a supervisor, that means then documenting those events, so that when you get to that annual point in time, you have already information that's already shared and understood between the employee and the supervisor.
Excellent perspective, and I really like the sort of to make it a little less cumbersome, incorporating it into that monthly group supervision. Well, it doesn't look like we have any additional questions. I did want to go ahead and put up your contact information slide because I know that you, during the presentation, invited folks to contact you if they have any additional questions. And as noted in the chat box, the recording of this presentation will be up on the TA Network's YouTube channel in the next couple of days, and it's going to be located in the Tribal SOC playlist. We want to thank Dan for providing great information today, and hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.